So welcome everyone. Nice to see you. Really happy that you've taken the time to join us today for the last in our webinar series on the Evidence Synthesis Infrastructure Collaborative. I'm here today with John Lavis, who will introduce himself in a minute, and we're hoping to have a really engaging session with you. Next slide. So just a really quick reminder that this was part of a webinar series that was specifically for citizen serving and citizen-led non-governmental organizations and citizen leaders to share your insights on this evidence synthesis infrastructure collaborative. And we did get a lot of great insights. Today, we're going to show you a little bit about how they shaped the development of the ESSIC roadmap and how the people who were in Cape Town, and I see that one of our citizen leaders has joined us today, so hopefully we'll hear from them too, and how they shaped our experience in Cape Town and the roadmap, and of course the citizen call to action. So really happy to have you here. And we're going to do a little poll. And if you want to put any more information about yourself, please use the chat to do that. But let's try to see who's here today. Okay. Taking a look. Sincerely. It's great. Thank you, everyone. And now let's see where people are calling in from. Hey, that's great. Okay, wonderful to see that geographic representation. That's been one of the most exciting parts about this project, is meeting people from all over the world. Okay. Thanks, everyone. Anything else you'd like to introduce yourself or say, please use the chat. And you're more than welcome to do that. Just before we start, we want to make sure that we clarify how we use the term citizens, as we realize that can be a term that has different connotations. So we're really using it for all of us members of society to keep the focus on the individual and not to imply formal citizenship status as determined by a government. So this includes undocumented individuals. And we also recognize that Indigenous peoples are sometimes forced to decline their Indigenous status to achieve citizenship of a country that now includes their traditional lands. We didn't choose the alternatives like public or publics because they're often considered a group and not individuals. And then we've got the whole list there of other words that are used, such as consumers and parents and patients and caregivers and people with lived experience, etc. There's a whole list, and all of those terms are really relevant to this work, which is not does not only health related, but goes to health, environment, education, etc. So that's how we use the term citizens. Okay, next slide. And we are here again to hear citizen perspectives. So we welcome everyone, but the focus really is on how the citizens' perspectives can shape the work. I'm going to say ESSIC from now on because it's just a word salad for me otherwise. So how we can shape the work of ESSIC. And if you are a member of one of the other groups, you can also, one of the other interest holder groups, you can also look at the opportunities that are available on the ESSIC website, so of how you can continue contributing to this work. And I'm going to hand it over to John Lavis. So John, you're going to come back on and quickly introduce yourself, and will give us a bit of background. Thank you.
Great. Thanks very much, Maureen, and really great to see all these folks on the line. My role in the ESSIC planning process was, like Maureen, being a member of the facilitation group. And then I'm also an advisor to the Wellcome Trust, which is one of the funders that will be supporting this work going forward and which supported the planning process. So as many of you know, between January and June, there was a very intensive planning process that was underway. The goal was to create a roadmap, and we're going to come back to that in a minute. And with the roadmap, the idea was to lay out a path to doing a number of things, one of which was making it easier to learn from others around the world with both rigor and speed. So nowadays, you can get the speed with things like ChatGPT, but we want to make sure that people have the opportunity to learn from others with both rigor and speed. This is also a way to reduce waste that is happening in the research space. And it's also a way to leverage artificial intelligence when it can be done safely and responsibly to make living evidence syntheses much more timely, much more relevant, and much more affordable. So a draft of the ESSIC roadmap was prepared and released publicly on the 13th of June. 5 different working groups fed into it, as did a governance planning group. That roadmap was then stress tested at the Cape Town meeting, and some of you on the line were present at that meeting. That took place from the 24th to the 26th of June. And then some significant adjustments were made to the roadmap based on that experience. And there's now 3 different versions of the roadmap, a 1-page infographic, and Maureen will be showing it to you shortly, a concise version of the roadmap, which is roughly 10 pages long, and then 11 if you include the infographic, and then the full version of the roadmap, which is very long. I think it's about 60 pages. Another key output of the Cape Town meeting was the Cape Town Consensus Charter. So a draft of that was released on the final day of the Cape Town meeting, the 26th of June, but then additional feedback came in, and the final version of the charter was released publicly in mid-August. So these different outputs are all now up on the ESSIC website. The 1-page, 11-page, and 60 or so page version of the roadmap and the Cape Town Charter. Some of the people who were very centrally involved as members of the ESSIC Secretariat updated the community in a webinar that was recorded at the end of August. So if you want a quick run through, we're going to give you a really concise run through focusing on what it means for citizens. But if you want the longer run through, you can watch that webinar. And there are additional webinars that are booked in August, 2 times. It'll be the same webinar, but offered twice, once on the 14th, once on the 16th, and then another set of webinars will be offered in December. So Maureen, I'll turn it back to you.
To my favorite slide. So here we are in Cape Town, and I'm really happy that today on the call, Euphrasia and Danilo are here. So I'm going to be asking, and I haven't checked recently, if there's someone else here, please let me know, but I'm going to ask them to jump in a few times to share their experiences. But I've identified everyone there. We were a small group, but I dare say mighty. And I'll show you on the next slide a little bit how we contributed. So all the way through, there's been contributions from citizens. So we started off with the 2 working groups and the governance planning group, where there were 4 citizen members, and those people worked really hard to provide input to all of the working and planning group reports. There were several stages of reports. I attended the weekly co-chair meetings and was able to give updates on what we were doing there and listen to what was happening. We led the drafting of the call to action document that we've shown in some of the other webinars. We attended the Cape Town consensus meeting and including hosting some dedicated breakout rooms specifically for citizen engagement. And we did fill every seat in the room. So that was one of my worries on my way there. What if nobody shows up? But absolutely very well attended and very, very interesting discussions. And we provided input into the final roadmap. And then the three additional citizen representatives attended the Cape Town meeting, and they're the ones on the picture. So Danilo, Violet, and Saya. And then we have this series, which we're concluding today. And we have the final version of the citizens call to action that was again refined after Cape Town and after the webinars that we had everything with us. So when we went to Cape Town, we went very well equipped. We had notes from everyone who said something at the webinar series. We also used a divide and conquer approach when we were there to spread ourselves out to be represented a little bit everywhere. We also heard that in the other sessions that weren't citizen engagement focused, there was a lot of talk about citizen engagement. So that was really exciting. And then we had all of the feedback on the citizens call to action. So we were not a lot of people, but we definitely spoke with many voices, and we were able to really incorporate everything that we heard from you. And we're very grateful for all the people who did give us feedback, because we were able to make sure that all of those messages, those key messages that we were asking you about, came through. And John will show you very shortly how all of that has transformed, I would say, the roadmap. So I'm going to hand it over to John, and I know that it's always great to see follow up. So we said this, we provided this feedback. How was that feedback used? So over to you, John.
Thanks very much, Maureen. Others on the line may be able to come up with other really compelling examples of where citizens had a transformative impact on a process and a set of outcomes. But this, for me, is the most dramatic example of citizens having a profound effect on the direction of travel being proposed as we go forward. So if you have a chance to see the ESSEC roadmap, I think you'll be knocked out by the number of times that citizens are seen as central to all of the different pieces of what's being proposed with ESSEC. I mentioned before that there are three versions of the ESSEC roadmap. Here you're seeing the one-page infographic version. So if you want a quick synopsis of the 5 steps called for in the roadmap, this is where you should turn. Then, as I mentioned, there's a concise version that adds about 10 pages of explanatory text, and then the very long version. This version, of course, is hard to read, but what we're going to do is just walk through each of the steps, starting at the bottom one by one, noting the incredible intersections with things that citizens called for. So if we move on to the next slide, so this is step 1, build a user-centered evidence synthesis infrastructure to serve everyone. Some of you may recall that there were 5 types of infrastructure initially envisioned, and there was a working group dealing with each of them. So the demand-side engagement part of the infrastructure calls for a mechanism to identify priorities that are widely shared by citizens. It also calls for developing a citizen panel to operationalize the citizen call to action. For the part of the infrastructure about data sharing and reuse, the roadmap calls for connected systems of living evidence data that make finding the evidence citizens need easier and more equitable. It also calls for data standards to make sure that citizens can have confidence in the quality of the included data. For infrastructure element 3, safe and responsible use of AI, the roadmap calls for AI tools that can support evidence use by citizens. It also calls for citizen-informed quality assurance and governance mechanisms over AI tools. For infrastructure element 4, methods and process innovation, it calls for new methods to support wider co-production. So having citizens work alongside evidence synthesis producers to generate these AI-enabled living evidence syntheses. It also calls for involving citizens in the application of these synthesis findings in a participatory way with diverse groups of citizens. And then continuing on, it also calls for tools and resources that can support citizen engagement in and in the use of evidence syntheses. So again, remarkable number of ways citizens are interwoven into the calls for action related to the infrastructure. If we now move on to step 2, which is about making user-centered evidence synthesis the norm. So this is about um, creating suites or groups of AI-enabled living evidence syntheses on all of the big issues of the day. The roadmap calls for co-producing these syntheses, so having citizens at the table on the teams that are producing these syntheses, and making sure that these syntheses address the priorities of decision makers, including citizens and citizen serving NGOs, and talks about doing that at different levels. So at the more local or community level, at the country level, but also where applicable at the regional and global level. We now move on to step 3. This is about working with intermediaries to support decision makers. So you'll see here in the infographic 8 different groupings of evidence intermediaries. So groups that support, let's say, advisory and decision-making processes, which you'll see in the top left. 2 cells to the right of that, you'll see citizen advisors. But very critically, in the top right, you'll see citizen-led and citizen-serving non-governmental organizations called out specifically as an absolutely critical intermediary that ESSEC needs to support in order for them to then have their desired impacts on the lives of everyday people. So here the roadmap calls for producing evidence that meets citizen needs so that evidence intermediaries have the relevant evidence that they can share with citizens, fostering an evidence synthesis ecosystem where citizens can be co-producers of evidence and also directly involved in the work of these evidence intermediaries, and enabling citizens to be users of evidence, both through these citizen-led and citizen-serving NGOs, but also many of these other evidence intermediaries that also aspire to try to support citizens using evidence in their everyday lives. Step 4, we're almost done. Ensure people start using or keep using actionable insights generated from synthesis with rigor and speed. So you'll see in the pediment, the kind of pyramid at the top, actionable insights, often embedded in tools people are familiar with, served up in different ways for different decision makers. That includes citizens, different sectors, different regions, and different languages. So the hope is that ESSEC feeds into places that citizens are already going for evidence. If you're sitting in Africa, and I see a number of people on the line from eBase, you're used to going to eBase for French and English language content that helps you in the education space or other domains, then let's build ESSEC into that source rather than create something new. So the roadmap talks about shortcuts to the world's best evidence, so making them available in ways that are much more easy for people to find and use, and also to provide people reassurance of quality so that they know that the evidence was looked at comprehensively and critically. And although it doesn't say it here, also look at it with an equity lens to understand how the findings vary by groups and contexts. Then finally, we come on to better informed decisions, and citizens here are singled out as one of the 4 types of decisions who ESSEC is really trying to inform. So government policymakers, organizational leaders, professionals like teachers, doctors, nurses, and so on, but also citizens critically singled out as a key decision maker that needs to be actively supported by ESSEC. So again, remarkable in how the work of our citizen partners was so profoundly acted on in how this roadmap envisions a better future. So thank you to all of you who contributed so actively. I hope you take pride in seeing the impacts of your contributions. And now we need to hold everybody to account to make sure they make good on these incredible commitments. Maureen, back to you.
Thanks, John. Before I go to the call to action, I see that I think I had the wrong Danilo. I think it's not the Danilo who attended, but Euphrasia is here, and she attended the Cape Town consensus meeting. So Euphrasia, if you're able to unmute, would you like to share some of your insights with us? Let's see here. Hmm. Just waiting to see if you can unmute Euphrasia, and if you can't, maybe if you've got something, you could put it in the chat otherwise, if you're willing to do that. Euphrasia co-facilitated the two breakout room sessions with me. We worked together as a team, and it was just great. No, I don't see Euphrasia coming on. Okay, so anytime, just interrupt me, Euphrasia, if you can jump in at another time. Would love to hear some of your reflections on what happened in Cape Town from your perspective. So I'll go on then with the update. So as you remember, one of our key contributions was the is the ESSIC citizens call to action on the use of evidence in everyday life. So we did update it after Cape Town to reflect those discussions and what we heard there, and also some of the later breaking. We had a webinar just before Cape Town also, so we did go in. We waited for Cape Town, then we did go in and make a few updates. So we added more about including people with disabilities and presenting the evidence in formats that work for them, and reducing those asymmetries of knowledge and power. So to really establish a common ground among citizens, we heard that a lot. We added quite a bit on the AI tools. We heard a lot of feedback from our citizens about that, including those assistive technologies that support people with disabilities, and but also just testing and adapting the AI tools. So more involvement in that. And then also to enable all these NGOs to start putting actionable insights from the AI-enabled living evidence synthesis alongside all of their needed forms of local evidence and other inputs to their work. So those are the major the major additions to the call to action after Cape Town and after the last of the webinar series. Well, thanks to everyone who gave us some feedback on that. Right now, we're the whole ESSIC project is working on a series of publications. Some of them are meant to be, a record of what actually occurred, and there will also be some reflection papers also. So, of course, we're right in there. We also want to contribute to that. So we're working right now on a citizen focused paper that talks about that 6-month process and reflecting on our experiences. And then, of course, we'll be really looking forward to doing some of the participate in the reflections document. So that's also very exciting. That's going to be in, like, we're working, the group is working on it now, and that'll be in the fall of this year, and they'll send it out, and hopefully to get the whole series published. So even though we're not a working group and we're not the planning group, we were included in the in this series, which is I think just great. Okay. Oh, Euphrasia just chatted with me. Okay. Okay. All right, Euphrasia. Weather, weather difficulties. If you come back on and you're able, just jump in. And if you can put something in the chat, that would be great too. So whatever you're able to do, we would be grateful for that. Okay, so we're at the halfway point, and now we would like to hear from you. I'm going to put the questions in the chat also, so that maybe we can put the slide down after. But really, you know, just don't sugarcoat it. Just what do you think about where we've gotten to? Now that the 6 month planning process is complete, what do you think needs to be prioritized early on in the implementation process? And what would you put on a short list for implementation? So, what are the priorities that you think should be on that short list? And is there something missing that we don't have in there that would help you to use evidence synthesis in your decision making? Okay, so I'm going to try to put them in the chat. So I'm opening it up to anyone who'd either unmute and share your insights, or if you're unable to do that, put it in the chat, and we'll take a look at that. We're also open to answering any questions that you have. Sometimes it's difficult to answer the questions that we have there without knowing maybe where we're moving to. So if you have questions about that, we're happy to answer any questions that you have. Okay. I'm going to try to put them in the chat. Who's going to be first? Somebody's got to break the ice. Okay, Janet, thank you.
I'm not even sure this is really on topic, but it's something I need to figure out more about is AI. I know it's very important, but I also know it can be used incorrectly. How do we learn how to use it correctly? Like, are there any resources you could point us to or things like that?
So I'm in the same boat as you are, Janet. I'm trying to figure it all out, but maybe John or somebody from the secretariat has some ideas, and it's a really good point, because there was a lot of talk about that, and there was a lot of talk about, let's get everybody on the same page and let's make sure that the AI is not harming us, that it's actually helping us, right?
Maybe it'd be a
So
good thing to have a webinar or two on. I know it's not really quite part of a roadmap, but it's something that I don't know enough about.
what do you think, John?
Yeah, no, I think it's a good idea. I think, but at the end of the month, we hope that a lot of the key funders will be making announcements about their first waves of investments in ESSEC. And from what I've seen, I would anticipate that some of those investments will go into making it easier for people to navigate AI tools, to know which ones can be used in what tasks and what we know about their current performance. So that won't necessarily meet everybody's needs, including citizens with pragmatic questions around how can I best leverage something like ChatGPT or something else. But it will start to move us towards a better sense of the landscape of what's out there, and what can it be used for, and with what confidence it can be used. So that's maybe step one. But to your point, Maureen, and Janet, the idea of some targeted webinars, specifically on what is our current understanding of this space, what can people, safely and responsibly use different AI tools for, could be very helpful. So I'll note that down, and I'm sure Maureen's doing that as well as a potential follow-up.
And are there any specific AI tools to trust more and ones to stay away from, that kind of thing?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Great suggestion, Janet.
Yeah, that's really helpful, Janet. I think our key message about AI that we brought to ESSEC was that we don't want to just be recipients of it. We want to be involved in how it's being used, how we're learning about it, and how our, like, be at the tables where those decisions are made. But to do that, we also we you know, we're not going to become little mini AI specialists, but we have to have a really good understanding of it, and it has to be presented in ways that are written in you know, in everyday language that we can understand, because we have a huge interest in that. So I think that message came out very clearly. The people from those groups who were leading those the working group, and there was some crossover into the other groups, were very responsive. Like met with them several times to discuss, you know, what the concerns were. And so we didn't get into the pragmatic stuff that you're asking about, which is really important. We got into more of the whole concept of how we should be engaged in it, and that's what we put on the table. And I think the pragmatic pieces will come out when the funding comes in and the projects are absolutely funded. But we've absolutely said that we, you know, we think that we have a role to play, and that we want to be in that AI ecosystem, I'm going to call it, because it's huge now, right? So thanks, Janet. Okay. Yes, Carrie's talking about that, where it went into the capacity um, uh, sharing. Okay, so Chris put a comment in the chat. She's saying that she thought it spent. Did you want to unmute, Chris, and talk a little bit?
Yeah, hello, good morning.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, it's just that this is one of the things that seems to me is one of the ways in which like ordinary people are put off by evidence if they know that the evidence is fundamentally skewed towards certain populations, and that their demographic or their population is marginalized or excluded, and how can we adjust for that or correct it and be frank about it, like expose it so that we go, these are the known discrepancies, but we're working to correct it. How can we do that to stop it undermining the entire initiative?
Thank you, Chris. In 2022, I think October 2022, the McMaster Health Forum led some citizen panels on the use of evidence in everyday life. And I was on that steering committee, but I was the note taker, one of the note takers. So I was listening intently. And one of the, like, word for word, that what you just said is that people said, you know, we'd have more trust in the evidence if we knew that we were at the tables. And that came a lot from people who either were in communities that are typically underrepresented in research, and we also heard it a lot from people in rural or remote communities saying, you know, because this was for the province that we live in, Ontario. We have a very big city called Toronto, and they said everything is Toronto centric, and we don't trust. So that's exactly what we heard. And it's something that ESSEC was, one of the basic tenets of it was to absolutely make this a global initiative where it wasn't skewed to one population. So thanks for that, Chris.
And maybe, Maureen, I'll just add that, you know, my sense is that in future, the aspiration would be that our questions that these syntheses are meant to address will always say, and how do the findings vary by groups and contexts, so that we get a much better sense of for which groups and in what contexts have things been studied and what did we find, but then to have clear signals go back to the research community about which are the groups and contexts that are absolutely essential to make the focus of next generation research. So I think Maureen's right. We need, you know, teams that reflect the diversity of groups and contexts that are synthesizing the evidence, but we need to make sure our questions and our feedback loops also allow for doing better, so that we keep becoming more inclusive over time and don't just keep having the same gaps recur over and over, year after year.
Thanks, Sean. I'm just looking at the chat. So Euphrasia's been able to put something in the chat. Yes, she talks about a steep learning curve. It was a very steep learning curve for everybody. Some days I felt like my head was going to explode. And it is a call to action. There's no doubt about that now. It didn't start that way, and it at the 3 month period, everything kind of shifted, and it's beautiful, Euphrasia, that you said it gives you hope to dream of the possibility of a world where evidence-informed decision making could be a reality. Yeah, I think that was the motivator for it. I'm gonna ask John to, Danilo's made a really good point about how we've been included in the steps, and you're asking about translations into different languages. And I know that you know every language has been written into, and if I do it, I'm gonna miss something. So can you tell everyone, John, what's available and where and that it's been translated?
Yeah, so I put a link in the chat box to the page from which you can navigate to 6 different languages. So the languages that ESSEC has been supporting translation into are Arabic, Chinese, English, Spanish, French, and Portuguese. So all of the documents are available in languages like English, and they should be available, if not already, very soon in those other 5 languages. So some of them are already ready, like the original Citizen Call to Action, already available in all the different languages, but the updated final version of the roadmap, the updated final version of the charter, may still need a couple more days, and for a few languages at most a couple of more weeks until everything is available. So I think Danilo is right. Often we live in language bubbles. The more that people who have pathways into communities speaking different languages, the more that you can make these materials available in the relevant languages to them, the better. And you'll always be able to access the most recent translated version through that link I put in the chat box.
Thanks, John. And Danilo, thanks for that question. And there's no one better to share a document than you sharing with your own community and people who speak your language. That's absolutely the way to go. So we're hoping that everyone who's on the call, who's interested in this work, will really make an effort to get it out there and to share it in the language of the groups so they speak it, and with the communities that you work with to make it just so that people are aware of it, are reading it, or you can refer to it in different, if you're giving workshops or webinars, that people could refer to it. It's really important to get it out there. And so we're hoping that, and that's why there's the shorter versions. There's even a 1-page version of the call to action, if that's something that's even easier for people to do that. So we try to make it as accessible as possible. So I know that you're all going to participate in that process and make sure to get the word out. And I guess evidence of that is that you're here today. So that's a really good first step. Okay. Anybody else? Questions? Or where do you think, what do you think the priority is? Like where, if you saw that, where would you say this is where you need to start?
Maybe, Maureen, while people are pondering that, I'll just say, because I know you wanted me to speak briefly at the end, I'll just do it now about next steps. So there is an event being planned alongside the UN General Assembly in late September. So the event will be on the 21st of September. It's a small event in terms of the number of people that can be fit into the room, but it will be broadcast live, and it will be recorded and shared immediately after. At that meeting, we hope that a number of the funders will be able to announce what their plans are for the immediate term in terms of starting to move forward on funding some of these key priorities in the roadmap. So that's going to be a key juncture for getting a bit of clarity over what the next 6 to 10 months might look like. My hope is also that they'll be in a position to start talking about transitional coordination and governance arrangements to start to, I guess, in a way, continue this process of getting people to work together using a collective impact approach. So there's a lot of work happening behind the scenes thinking about these transitional arrangements so that with the ESSEC planning process having come to an end, we now need in this interim period a set of people who will be able to help make difficult decisions, but also provide input from the very diverse sets of interest holders that have a stake in ESSEC to make sure their voices continue to steer the future direction. So hopefully by the end of September, we'll have clarity about two things: a sense of the initial funding priorities and a sense of the transitional arrangements under which ESSEC will move forward.
That's really helpful, John. Could you just maybe elaborate a little bit on when you said the funders?
Mm-hmm.
We know the Welcome Trust because that was how the big announcement was made and branded all over the project. But what happened after that initial interest in the Welcome Trust? And I know a lot's been going on behind the scenes, and it would be interesting to just understand, like,
Yeah.
what do you mean by that?
So there's currently what's called a funders interest group, an ESSEC funders interest group that has around 35 funders from around the globe who are involved in it. They span from research funding groups to international assistance funders, to philanthropies, to governments. So very different interests, some interested in how can I contribute to ESSEC and leverage it to make sure that the future flow of research addresses key priorities. Others may be much more interested in how do I help to shape this so that I can make better policy decisions in future, better programming decisions in future, better investments in an array of different activities. So that group has its first post-ESSEC, first post-Cape Town meeting next week. So that will be an opportunity to catch those funders up on where everything has got to and give them a sense about where some of their early moving peers are already deciding to make some of their investments. Then there's a smaller set of funders that have already made funding commitments, and those are the ones who we hope at the UN General Assembly event will be able to describe in a bit more detail what their plans are. Some of those funders have already articulated the direction in which they are likely to go. Others will be announcing it at the end of September. So currently there are 6 funders that have made already funding commitments, and those names will be announced at that UNGA event, as well as, to the extent that they're able to speak to it, the details. So it's certainly no longer just Welcome, it's also UK Research and Innovation as one example of another funder, but a number of others that will be making announcements at the end of the month.
So, John, correct me if I'm wrong, but how I'm interpreting it as a, non-academic here is we're going to see a multitude of various projects. Is that how it's going to kind of, like, people will commit to, I'd like to fund this, and we will see, based on the recommendations and all of the work that was set up in the roadmap and what's needed, people will pick an area, or funders or funders will pick an area and go with projects. Is that how you see it?
Well, I think that, the very strong aspiration is that the funders work with a collective impact approach. So they don't just go off and fund a little piece that is disconnected from the rest. They engage with their peers to say, how would you feel if we were to fund this piece and this piece as part of a bigger whole? So Welcome, who's already announced £45 million investment, has many areas that it would be able to support. Another funder may come in and say, well, we would be able to support this piece and this piece. So we're trying to do it in a way that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, and it all makes sense together, but we also have to acknowledge that different funders have different mandates, different board sign off on what they can and can't do, so they each need to play to their respective priorities and strengths. But the hope is to have a big picture of funding that is available that moves on the most important things in the short term, while laying the groundwork for the medium and longer term priorities. Does that make sense, Maureen?
Yes.
Yeah.
And does anyone have a another question about that? Because even for us who are involved, it hasn't been, imagining what's going to happen after has been something that we're kind of grappling with, and for us as citizens who are involved, like what's our role coming up, and I know John's going to speak a little bit about that at the end, but what can we do to ensure that all the groundwork's been laid, and that we're going to be at those tables, and we're going to be part of this ecosystem. So that's does anyone else have any questions about the future direction? Just looking. Okay. Is there any exploration of synergies with other organizations, John, from Chris?
Oh, yes. Well, in a way, that's been the whole process, and it continues to be essentially a full-time job for many people to work through the synergies. So, the different working groups in the governance planning group were focused from the very beginning about trying to find all the other groups that were working in the spaces that they were focused on. The roadmap speaks to the many, many categories of interest holder. I think we have 11 that we see as essential, and often a category of interest holder within that. There may be 5, 10, 15 different subtypes of interest holders. So I think that is very much front and center. And again, this collective impact approach remains really central in many, many people's thinking. Right now, what's happening, we have all these fragmented efforts by these different groups, and the issue is how do we, again, get people working together? And for some, this is their exclusive focus. They live and breathe this stuff. For other people, this is one of 50 topics that they are paying attention to. So we need to figure out how do you engage those other groups in a way that maximizes the value of the interaction and maximizes the synergy, and doesn't take too much time or doesn't give them enough information to realize the synergy. So I think that's very front and center in this thinking.
John, anybody else? So if there's nothing else at this point, we'll move to the next step slide, which is our last slide. Might give you back 5 minutes of your day. Put that up. Okay. Thank you. Okay. So my message really to you is, first of all, thank you for attending today. It doesn't matter at what stage you came into you had your interest in ESSIC or came into the project. It's that, think of it as the party where you're never too late to attend. So if you came in at the end of the 6 months, you're saying, wow, this sounds really interesting, there's some potential here, please stay engaged. So you need to sign up for the ESSIC newsletter, because we're not going to be running any more citizen webinars for now. We don't have any that we foresee any. We're in that stage now where all the work is being done to set up all of the funding. So you sign up for the ESSIC newsletter. There will be 2 other webinars, and they're for all interest holders, including citizens. So would be great to get people from our interest holder group attending those webinars too. And please, ask questions and make your presence known. One will be in October. You see the two different times to help with time zones for a global audience, and one in December. I'm definitely going to be listening in on the 21st to the UN General Assembly. That's extremely exciting. And there should be some announcement coming from there. But really, it's really about coming in to the project where your interests lie at the time that's good for you. There are people here who are on the call today who've been to all 4 of our webinars. Some maybe your first time. It doesn't matter where, we're happy to have people join us, and please continue to do so. I want to thank John Lavis for co-hosting this entire series with me. He's been an incredible champion for the citizen engagement piece. There's a lot of work that, we've done a lot of work as citizen members, and you coming in and commenting on the call for action and on the webinars and the key messages is all great too. And we needed also some champions at the organizational level, and we definitely are grateful for everything there. We're really grateful for all the time that you also gave to give us such, thoughtful insights. Like, we really did go to the meeting feeling that we were prepared to bring that voice, and that was really important. They don't want it, they want to hear from multiple voices. I want to thank Euphrasia, who's unfortunately in a big storm wasn't able to unmute, who's been an incredible member and friend to me for many years now. We're on Cochrane together, and who was there at the Cape Town meeting and co-facilitated the sessions where we got the feedback. Another person who's not here on the call, well, on the call, but in the background, is Carrie Waddell, who did a lot of background work for us, pulling up all of the, going through the roadmap and pulling out all the citizen pieces. And that was really important work that, we didn't have to go in and do. And also, speaking for myself, not speaking for anybody else, but not having the skills to do a really good job at that. So thank Carrie for that. And Jeremy Grimshaw, who's not on the call, but who was also a really big champion for the work and helped me to consolidate all of the feedback that we received on the call to action, which is quite an academic pursuit. And that was really helpful too. So a lot of people worked really hard. Richard Morley, who's not here, but who was the co-writer of the initial call for action, and who's involved who's continuing to be involved now in the publication, was a huge partner. And Michelle Hamilton Page, our other citizen member, and it's like 6 o'clock in the morning for her, and we just had a holiday weekend in Canada, so she's not on the call, but was also in Cape Town and worked really hard. So it takes a lot of people. And then, of course, we had our 3 citizens who arrived in Cape Town, Danilo, Violet, and Saya. And we just went in there, and we had a plan, and we made sure that our voices were heard. And I was very happy to meet them and very grateful for their contributions too. And I hope I didn't forget anyone. I probably have, which is why people don't normally do this, because they know they're going to forget somebody. So if I did, John, jump in. And no, you can't. Okay. And Janet, you've got a question?
To sign up for these webinars, do we just go to the Essex website and find it?
Yeah.
Essex, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, just go to it's right there. It's right on the front page, and sign up for the webinars, and sign up for the newsletter too. So
And the one on the 21st is there too?
No, John, do you think they'll put a link to it? They'll probably put a link once it goes through the UN. The website will probably link it, right?
So we'd hear a recording of it then.
Yeah, it's a really good point, actually. I don't think any of us have thought about that yet. So
Yeah.
I'll write that down, Janet, to ask them to add a link to it as soon as
Yeah.
it's available.
Right. Okay. Anybody else, or any last words? Danilo?
Hi, Maureen. Hi, John. Thank you for having me.
It is you. You're tricking me with the
Yes.
Lima. I'm like, no, he's not from Peru.
Yeah.
Tricky.
It's me.
Oh, very, very bad.
I really appreciate this moment. Thank you for this presentation. I have a doubt about this process, because we have 5 years with a ZIC roadmap, and we need monitoring this process. I have a doubt how we can monitoring this process if the organizations have really including citizens in these methods, if the organizations have followed these 5 steps with citizens, including. I have doubt we intend monitoring with meetings like this meeting, or with surveys or other methods.
Maureen, would you be
John.
okay if
Yes,
so
please.
thank you,
It's
and
a great question.
good to see you, Danilo. So I think that for the meetings that I've been in on, I think the funders recognize that monitoring, evaluation, and learning is going to be absolutely critical. And my hope is that at the UNGA event, the UN General Assembly event, that when the funders talk about their commitments, that right from the beginning, one of the funding commitments will be for monitoring, evaluation, and learning. So we have the data to know whether and how citizens are being actively engaged, and if so, with what impacts. And how can we do better? So it's monitoring, evaluation, and learning. How do we have learning and improvement cycles? Because it could be some of our early living evidence syntheses don't do as good a job as we could of working with citizens. So how do we do better in round two? Same with the AI work. Maybe some of it works well for citizens, others don't. How do we do better in the next round? So I think you're raising a really important point, and my hope is that we're going to, at the end of this month, see announcements that move us in that direction of having learning and accountability mechanisms in place to make sure these weren't just empty words around citizen engagement. They're taken seriously. We learn and improve, and we hold each other to account.
And just add to that,
Thank
John,
you,
one of
John.
the other elements that we built into it was the costing.
Mhm.
So, at the very beginning, we said, look, you can't do all this on the backs of volunteers, and that you're costing everything else out. We need to cost out the work that citizens will do. And we worked really hard with the two economic specialists who were working on the costing. So kind of built that into, because that could be a huge barrier to actually operationalizing. So hopefully between that and the monitoring and evaluation, we really do hold into account. Thanks, Danilo.
Thank you,
Nice to see
Maureen
you.
and John. Nice to see you too.
Okay, we're right at 10 o'clock. So we didn't give you back any time. I was hopeful, but too much to do. So thanks everyone. Have a good rest of the day, whatever time you're at today, and don't forget to sign up and be in touch.